Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, did you know that Marvin Harrison Jr. has a younger brother? Did you know that Marvin Harrison Jr.'s younger brother also plays football? Did you know that Marvin Harrison Jr. thinks his younger brother might be ahead of where he was at the time that his brother is currently at right now?
No.
This was also news to me.
How old is this younger brother?
He is in 8th grade. I talked to Marv after the interview and just said, is he going to be doing the same school that you and Kyle did? He wasn't sure. But
so is he at 2028?
He would be at 2027.
7? Okay.
No, 2028. 2028, yeah.
7's a freshman this year, so.
Yes. Yes.
What's his name?
Jet, Jett.
Wow.
Jet Harrison. So
it's all lining up, Tom.
It is. You can sort of all, and you broadly get the sense that Marvin Harrison has had a satisfactory college football career thus far.
Yeah.
So, if he was to advise his younger brother on where to go. Anyway, Ohio State has done okay with the sons of really good NFL wide receiver thing recently. So
is he the early favorite to be the first 2028 commit for Ohio State?
I don't want to get ahead of things because he is again a 2028.
You put in your magical orb of wonderment prediction.
I mean, do we get extra points for being early?
This would be worth a lot of points.
This would be worth a lot of points before a single set. So again, like we talk a lot about with the Michigan story, we don't want to get too ahead of things. I don't want to start projecting stats or anything here. I just want to bring the information to the viewers that was just made available to myself and a handful of other media.
Interesting.
I just thought, sounds like a thing.
Does he know if there are any more Bosas?
I thought about the Bosa thing as well because Joey Bosa was here and you thought, well, that's definitely the best that this family is going to produce. And then it was like, well, So
I'm not going to go that far yet. I still think,
let's pump the brakes. Right. I just want to.
Right now, if you put Marvin Harrison among the Harrisons at Ohio State, he would be at the top. You've got Marvin Harrison, Zach Harrison, Preston Harrison. There's another Harrison that I just had on top of my mind that I forgot. But regardless, I think you still go with Marvin.
Yes, Preston. The way people talked about Preston back in the day was. We probably don't need to be focusing on the early to mid 90s frequently injured Buckeyes. There's probably other stuff to talk about.
No, there is. And we are here after practice on Wednesday. I spoke with Ryan Day and a bunch of players I will not remember because there are a bunch and we're running around. Cody Simon, Marvin Harrison, Kyle McCord, Donovan Jackson,
Davison Igbinosun.
I think that may have been.
I think
not get. Yeah, that's the other Harrison I was thinking of. Yes, Harrison would be. I would put Malik Harrison above Zach Harrison.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair.
I would put William Henry Harrison above Benjamin Harrison.
Brief career, but notable.
Still, I mean, it's what you do with the time you've got. So Kyle McCord.
Wear a coat, kids.
Yes, Kyle McCord, heavily taped ankle, says he's doing better. Says it would have taken a lot more to get him for him to pull himself out of that game against Wisconsin, doing okay, and just something he said about learning to play with the pain, learning how to run with it, how to walk with it, and how to throw with it, basically. And I think he's dealt with for a few weeks now, maybe a month at this point, but got re-aggravated against Wisconsin, and then you have to kind of all over again deal with what is the pain threshold, which is what he's dealing with. But so far, like he's said, he's doing pretty good so far. I mean, we'll see how it is on Saturday, but I didn't see any limping or anything. And like I said, it was pretty heavily taped.
Yeah, it feels. I mean, they're going to have to be cautious with him because I saw Devin Brown. Did we get an update on Devin Brown's status? Because it feels like the Kyle McCord answer is going to hinge a little bit on the Devin Brown answer.
I did not hear anything from Day on that. I know he was out there jogging, throwing around.
Yeah, but, I mean, Day talked on.
He was dressed
Tuesday. He was dressed. He was in a no contact jersey, which normally would mean something, but with quarterbacks doesn't mean anything. Day said on Tuesday the plan was for him to practice, and then you kind of see. I think the game plan for Kyle McCord is going to hinge on three things. One, what is the score? Two, how does Kyle McCord feel? And three, what is Devin Brown's availability? And, maybe not in that specific order, but in some order, those three things. Sprained ankle is going to feel better as or whatever that ended up being, but is going to feel better as you go and you get treatment and you rest, ice, compression, elevation, everyone all together. And I'm sure he's getting as much treatment as you can possibly get for that. And this is not a weekend when you probably need him at absolutely 100%. You have probably a couple weeks before you need to have him at absolutely 100%, but they also can't really afford to play without him this weekend either.
No, and even if Devin Brown is back, he's not going to be 100% right out of the gate. McCord was asked about his 2 interceptions, asked about his first one, and the quote is, "It was just a dumb play on my part." And I think the better part of that, the better quote or the context or the gist was that it's better to do it now than later on. And he was one of the talking to Donovan Jackson about stacking days, not making the same mistake 2 days in a row. And so he was like, well, it's better to make that mistake now than to make it again down the road, or, something to that effect. And as long as you're learning from your mistakes, you can live with them. It's when you don't learn from them that they start to cost you.
Right. It's the all my losses were lessons. As long as all of your losses were, and first of all, as long as all of your losses were not literally losses, because that would be a problem. But as long as your individual one-on-one play kind of losses actually are lessons and you learn from them, that's okay. That's fine. And I think you've seen this year in a lot of fronts of this team, the offensive line, but in a lot of areas, that this team has been progressing and has been improving in a lot of these areas. And, do yourself a favor if you're worried about the offensive line. Go back and watch the Indiana game. The offensive line is still not where it needs to be, but the offensive line is miles from where it was against Indiana. So that's, there's a lot that still needs to happen between now and Thanksgiving weekend, but there has been progress, and now it's more a matter of, okay, can they keep making progress, and can that progress maybe even speed up a little bit, because the Michigan game is not getting any further away.
Yeah, Tom, I've been instructed by my wife to remind people, if you're watching this right now, go ahead and hit the thumbs up, because I've been told that we do not mention that enough, and so I wanted to mention that in case she's watching, and I don't want to get in trouble when I get home. So please, for my sake, hit the thumbs up.
Is that the Tony Gerdeman Burners account?
No. I don't. Maybe.
Well, the Tony Gerdeman burner account says nice things about you, so I'm pretty sure it's not your wife.
No, it wouldn't be that.
And I've been reminded by my wife to not forget to take out the garbage. So feel free to act on that if you guys want to.
I thought there was going to be a joke about Kevin in there.
No. Why would I make a joke about Kevin? That would be mean. I would never.
One finger, right off the edge.
right on the off button. Getting Emeka Egbuka back possibly this week. It sounds like there's a good chance that happens. Kyle McCord talking about just reminding everybody of what he does when he's out there. He's just, hey, remember that Notre Dame game, how much they needed him and how much the big plays that he made down the stretch. That's what he brings to this offense. And they've gotten some able-bodied participation from Xavier Johnson in that role, getting Carnell Tate out there and moving some guys around. So they've been able to make do. But I think we may, not us, but others, or maybe some, have forgotten what this offense can be when Emeka is out there. And that's something that Marvin Harrison also talked about. It's just the frustrating aspect of never being at full strength offensively for very long. And he mentioned, like last year when they didn't have Jackson Smith and Jigba for nearly the entire season. And this year not having Emeka out there is it's been tough. Guys have stepped up, but when you have your offense can do more, but you're not able to because of injuries, it's frustrating.
I'm sure it's frustrating right now, and I'm sure it's frustrating for everyone, the other receivers who are maybe a little more covered, for Kyle McCord, who has one fewer potentially wide open, or hey, watch this dude do something superhuman kind of guy out there. But also, we want to flip it a little bit. Boy, okay, the offense looks okay right now. You saw what a difference it made to get Trayvon Henderson back last week. That was a whole different offense than it was a week or two earlier. Now, if and when you get Emeka Egbuka back, and watch me, I'm going to hold my breath that they're going to get him back this weekend. Ready? he's, maybe he's good to go this weekend. Does that have any correlation to whether he plays this weekend? Well, it hasn't so far in the past, but I guess we'll see on Saturday.
Yeah.
Whenever he comes back, then you have someone else in addition to Marvin Harrison, someone else in addition to Cade Stover, who, if you haven't taken a look at where Cade Stover is in the Big Ten receiving standings, he is Michigan's leading receiver is Roman Wilson, and Cade Stover is virtually identical to Roman Wilson. He might have like one fewer catch and 15 fewer yards or something like that, and that's after a 0-for-0 last week. Cade Stover has turned into like a legitimate receiving threat for this team, and you have Marvin Harrison, and you add potentially Emeka Ibuka in, and you have Travion Henderson back, and it's like, okay, if the offensive line continues to improve and Kyle McCord continues to improve and get healthier, you may be cooking with gas sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and getting Travion back like they did last week, talking to Donovan Jackson about what does that do for an offensive line. And he said, obviously all of the running backs bring their own thing, but he gets north-south really quickly. And when you see that success, it builds the morale, then builds the momentum, and they kind of feed off of the success they're having, because it's hard to feed off of 0 yards on first down, 2nd and 10, 2 yards. Now you're at 3rd and 8. It's hard to build off of that momentum, Tom.
You have to have success if you want to build off of success.
Yeah.
And the success rate on a 0 yards on first down and 4 yards on 2nd and 10 is the success rate there is 0, because you have to have to be 4 yards on first down and then half of what you need on second down in order to be considered successful. So, but this is. I talked to Ross Fulton about this on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning episode that dropped tonight. And if you want to see the video with all of the plays in it, you can do that on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse at BuckeyeHuddle.com. There's a regular version that's just Ross and I talking like we generally have for the history of that show. That's on YouTube. If you just want to hear us talk about it, if you want to watch it with the plays and be able to sync that all up, you can do that if you're a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. But Ross talked about how they're diversifying the run game, and it's not just sort of the same base stuff. They've really sort of figured out, okay, this is some stuff that you can do. Here's some stuff that you can do off of the stuff that you've done that works. Then all of a sudden, some of the big hits are stuff that they haven't necessarily shown a whole lot. Some of the big hits from the Wisconsin game. Some of it was just better execution. Some of it was diversifying, figuring out what you're good at, doing that more often. This is, again, all these little pieces. You're sort of stacking, you're sort of building. It is a process. A season is not a, if you're just sort of like the same all year, you look great at the beginning of the year and then you look terrible at the end of the year. This is a team that has shown kind of continued growth in terms of skill, in terms of scheme, all of that kind of stuff this year, which is, now that you're heading into November, this is when that really starts to matter.
Yeah, and when you're doing more of the stuff that defenses aren't ready for, haven't seen much of, and you're doing it well, that also builds to you being able to have the confidence to do the stuff you haven't been doing well better, because that's something that Ryan Day has talked about, all of the coaches talk about. During the week, you continue to work on what you do well, you perfect what you do well, but you improve what you don't do well, what you've been struggling at, you bring that up, you raise that up. And they have been hitting some big shots in the running game in this past game. And then I think that gives them confidence to, all right, let's go back to, off tackle boundary type of stuff and do that. And suddenly it works a little bit more. One of the things that Donovan Jackson said was that when you know what you're doing, you play faster. And so over this course of these 8 games as a unit, they know more of what they're doing. There's still one thing here, one thing there that holds this back from being the 200-yard per game on the ground offense that we've known it to be over the years. And I don't know that they'll get there this year, but if you can get it randomly, like this particular game, you got 200, that's a positive step. And I think a Rutgers defense, which has been pretty stingy, it's Rutgers, but you never want to regress to 103 yards on 37 carries.
Right. Yeah, you've got it. This is not, if you have not spent a lot of time looking at or thinking about Rutgers this week, this is not the 2019 sad sack end of the Chris Ash era Rutgers. This is a Rutgers team that looks like, an adult has been in charge of the program for a few years and has started recruiting players who are at least, on the Big Ten level. This is not playing a like mid-level MAC team in Big Ten clothes. It is playing an actual Big Ten team. They're 6-2. They don't have any great wins yet, but neither does Michigan. So, should Rutgers be ranked in the top 4 of the college football playoff? Probably not, but I mean, you can't say no. This is also a Rutgers team that has not given up any big plays this year. I was looking at the CFB stats earlier tonight, and it is amazing how many categories Ohio State and Rutgers are 1 versus 2 in the in terms of big plays allowed. Rutgers number 1 in the country, having allowed 4 plays of 30-plus yards. Ohio State second with 5. Rutgers and Ohio State tied for first in the nation with 0 40-plus yard plays allowed. And Rutgers is first in 20-plus play. Second in 20-plus play yards, plus yard plays allowed, with 13. Ohio State 5th with 19. I mean, this is a game where you're going to have to be methodical. This is honestly probably a pretty good test for Ohio State, where this is not a team that's going to beat them, almost certainly, but it's a team that's going to force them to be precise. This is a team you have to be. I mean, the players keep talking about being on their P's and Q's, which I don't know when they were talking to my grandmother 30 years ago, but they apparently were. They have to get all the little stuff right. You have to, you can't have that, 4 guys in the offensive line did their jobs, but 1 didn't, and so therefore the play blew up. Okay, 2 receivers ran the right route, but 1 guy didn't, realize he needed to do fill in the blank, and so then the play blows up. You have to do all the little stuff. You have to be really methodical, really meticulous against a team like that. Not because they're incredibly talented, but just because you're probably not going to just be able to do the chuck one deep to Marvin Harrison play 3 times and boom, it's 21 points. You're going to have to really be focused and methodical. That's the kind of thing that probably prepares them a little bit for later in the season when you're playing better competition.
I'm just going to go ahead and throw out dibs on bold predictions
of at least 1 play of 40-plus yards.
Ohio State at least 1 play of 40-plus yards. You can have Rutgers having 1 play of 40-plus yards. Both of those worth 1 point. Lock it in.
I will take Ohio State.
Farm on Ohio State having at least 1 play of 40 yards against Rutgers. It is fool's gold. They have played Michigan's schedule short of having to play Michigan. They're trash.
Kevin says he would bet the farm on Ohio State having at least 1 play of 40 yards or more on Saturday. Rutgers has played trash. Did you say including Michigan?
No. I said they played Michigan's schedule short of having to play Michigan.
Yes, they've played Michigan's schedule short of having to play Michigan, but they also did have to play Michigan. Are we in agreement?
Ohio State 1 play of at least 41 yards on Saturday.
We're not going to do this now. We'll have to save it for the show. We will name that tune up to, I don't know what the number is going to be, but I guess we're going to find out. I can't.
What is 17 plus 34? 51. 1 play of 51 yards or more. Cannon. Boom. Lawyered. Next.
Davison Igbinosun will be playing against his brother. Said it's a dream come true. His brother was the guy he's always looked up to, basically, in terms of football, and said they'd always envisioned playing together. But this isn't a bad alternative to go home, play against each other. A bunch of family will be there, so this will be a fun opportunity for all of them, and it'll be a great family photo afterwards. But he's obviously excited to be playing against his brother. The only thing better would be if one was a receiver, one was a corner, and they're matched up that way.
Yeah, his brother also a defensive back, so they will not go head-to-head. Their stat lines are eerily similar. I think his brother has
penalties.
That I didn't see. I think his brother has 1 more tackle than he does this year, I believe. But in Davison Igbinosun, I don't know if people know this, was committed to Rutgers at one point for a few months before he got an offer and decided to commit to Ole Miss because he wanted to play in the SEC. But this is a guy who is, anytime New Jersey guys go back to Rutgers, I feel like we have the same conversation, which is, and it's the same conversation Rutgers has. Like, Rutgers I remember listening to Rutgers games on the radio in the early 90s, and it was always like, oh, Doug Graber, Terry Shea, if they can just get the New Jersey kids to stay home. And it has been the same story for 30, 40 years. Schiano is doing a pretty good job of having better talent there. If you can get, and the question is always, can you get a Davison Igbinosun to stay home? And so far, not really. And it's kind of funny that their quarterback is, Gavin Wimsatt was one of the higher ranked recruits that they've gotten. And he's not a New Jersey guy. He's from Kentucky, which is super random. But, they're building something there. But for the New Jersey guys, it's always kind of fun for them to go home. And, when Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Tyler Friday were on Ohio State's team, they would always kind of get the ceremonial start in the Rutgers game because it was like, well, I mean, what are they going to do? So, but this is really kind of a homecoming game for Kyle McCord and Marvin Harrison Jr. too, because New Jersey is a very small state. You think you can go one end to the other for in like an hour and a half or something like that. It is not a big state, depending on traffic on the Parkway, of course. But, being Philly guys, this is sort of like north central Jersey, central Jersey doesn't exist. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to get into New Jersey stuff. It's the southern part of northern New Jersey. But, those guys are both from the Philly area. And so this is kind of a homecoming game for them too. Believe me, I can get it. If we want to do an hour on New Jersey minutia, we can do it. But don't worry, you're going to get to hear it all in the car on the way to Rutgers.
And the Kyle McCord connection goes beyond geography. His dad played at Rutgers, was a quarterback at Rutgers, and grew up
when Greg Schiano was a GA.
Grew up going to those games and rooting for Rutgers. So this can be a bittersweet moment, obviously, for the McCord family. But there's going to be a bunch of people there watching Kyle as well. Certainly watching Marvin Harrison getting back home-ish as well. Anything else from any of the people that you talked to that we haven't touched on?
No, I only had Marvin and Davison Igbinosun, and then I ran over for Ryan Day when he was over there. But that was it. I did not hear Donovan or Kyle or anyone else.
Yeah, I think we've covered most of it. Kevin, any questions?
Yeah. First of all, people asking if we can ask Schiano about his halftime comments, and I said he still hasn't talked about Tennessee yet. So good luck with that.
The halftime comments from the Michigan game. He came out and said he was quoted somewhere that that was about officiating and not about, or it was. I think he was sort of indirectly quoted, like it was in I don't remember whose report it was. This was a week or two ago, but apparently it was, he did a halftime interview during the Michigan game where he just basically said like, yeah, some stuff that's not right is going on out there. And everyone, as soon as the Stallions thing broke, everyone went, oh, and then he said publicly or, to a reporter that was really about some officiating stuff and some calls that had gone against them more so than the Stallions thing.
I don't like that narrative.
Well, you can just, Tony, it's 2023. You can just make up whatever you want.
I will. I think it was Ryan Day's fault.
One of his relatives, anyway.
Mark Fetters, is anyone really worried about Rutgers?
Is anyone really worried about Rutgers? I think you're more worried about Rutgers than you would have been at any point in the past, just because this is the first time. I mean, Rutgers under Greg Schiano, the first time in the 2000s, got to the point where they were like a top 25 team. I think they might have won the Big East one year or shared the Big East title one year. They're not winning the Big Ten in the early 2000s, but they got to the point where they were a top 20-ish, top 30-ish team for a couple of years. I think they're potentially on the way back to the point where they could get to that point at some point. They're not there yet. Clearly, to be clear, they are not there yet. This is a team that has a good defense and a not particularly fun or effective offense. They are basically a Big East team that belongs in the Big Ten West is kind of the shorthand.
That's a fantastic judgment. Yeah, they should be out there. And they are very Big East. I think it's not that you don't worry about it. This is still a dangerous game in that if you sleepwalk through it, you could be into a game in the fourth quarter where you're like, oh, you got to crank it up. And sometimes it doesn't crank up when it's that late in a game on the road. But I think they're going to be wary of all of that and do everything they can to start quickly. But really, offensively, there's only so much that Rutgers can do in this game. They can't throw the ball. They complete 50% of their passes. They run the ball against bad teams. They're 5-0 at home. but they haven't beaten a team this year that has a above 500 record. I think they've beaten one or two 500 teams, but haven't beaten anybody. They've lost their 2 games against legitimate opponents in Wisconsin and Michigan, and they've done nothing else. And they win through defense, special teams, time of possession. It's very, very ugly.
And this is going to be a game where I think it's not that Ohio State's in danger. It's that you're in danger of being annoyed sitting on your couch and going, this is Rutgers. They're always up by 40 at halftime on Rutgers. Why are they not up by 40 on halftime at Rutgers against Rutgers this year? And the answer is because it's a slightly, it's a better Rutgers team. Ohio State has won a bunch of games this year with really good defense, inconsistent offense, and, scoring 10 to 14 points less than everyone thinks they should and everyone predicts they will. So expect quite possibly more of the same this weekend.
Unmute my mic. Mika Hanna, is Xavier Johnson banged up? I thought we would use him more this year.
Is Xavier Johnson? No, he's not banged up. I think they've been using him as much as maybe they expected to, maybe even more with Emeka Egbuka's injury. It's just if Emeka is playing and Marvin Harrison is playing and Julian Fleming is playing and Kate Stover, it's difficult to put Xavier Johnson in there. And when you do put him in there, you're doing it to use him, which makes it more predictable. So you have to kind of find ways to put him in there where you're not going to use him, just to make sure that when you do put him in there, they're not focused on him. But I think I'm interested to see how much they use him once Emeka is back full time, because I think they've found some stuff with him on those jet sweeps. He runs those really well, but I don't think it's going to continue that way if you only bring him in and every time he's in, he touches the ball. Like, that's a red alert. The 0 is in, he's going to get the ball, and we know it's going to be a jet sweep, and boom, it's a 3-yard loss. So you have to maneuver that and manufacture different ways to get him involved while still using him where he's best. And I think it's that jet sweep action where he's at his best. And I do think, Tom, we could see him more at running back as well if they continue to want to redshirt Dallin Hayden, because to me, he becomes their number 3 running back.
Yeah, and I could see that potentially. And just in case you missed the news earlier in the week, Mayan Williams out for the year. So they are probably in the market for a 3rd running back behind Travion Henderson and Chip Trainum. I talked to Ross about this on the morning show that dropped earlier this afternoon, about a way that there was a play on there that he showed where they use Xavier Johnson out of kind of a bunch formation, and he ends up being kind of the lead blocker on one of the big runs for Travion Henderson. So there are ways to use him. There are ways to get him in there. And, he's someone who he's not like the entree. He's probably more than a side dish, but he's not like the main ingredient of this offense, which that's
tapas. He's a small plate.
Yeah. That's good. He's tapas. And, he has a role. Good things happen when he's doing that role, but he's not, Marvin Harrison. They're throwing the ball 15 times a game to Marvin Harrison. That's never going to be Xavier Johnson. Xavier Johnson is going to be the guy who comes off the bench and catches the touchdown against Notre Dame last year and then covers the ensuing kickoff, or catches the touchdown against Georgia in the Peach Bowl and then covers the ensuing kickoff. He has a role, he has a spot, but that spot is not to be the primary weapon for the offense.
Yeah, you can go to the restaurant for him because you like that specialty. Marvin being like the 64-ounce steak, where that's what's on the sign of the big.
And it was $18.
The big 64-ouncer or whatever. There's definitely room for him. I mean, they've been trying to get him involved keep him involved for the last couple of years. And I would like to see it continue once Emeka is back, because I think he does some things for them. But you have to find the opportunities to put him out there, because when they're finally healthy, you want them at full strength. You want their best players on the field, and you can only put 5 of those guys on the field at a time. And Xavier, for all he does, can't play tight end.
Yeah, John Alexander. The offensive line is improving, especially with the run. They're a little shaky on pass pro, but they are improving.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with all of that. The pass pro issues feel like, not that they're just getting bull rushed and beaten. It just feels like there's assignment stuff. There's stuff that they're seeing that they're getting confused on. And that's all stuff that's correctable. And based on the amount of stuff that has gotten corrected already this season, it feels like that's something that is going to continue to improve as the season goes along. And, getting Emeka Egbuka back is probably also going to improve your pass pro, because then you have another guy on the other side who the defense is going like, well, do we need to keep a safety back over here? And that helps your pass pro too, just because you're dealing with fewer guys coming at your quarterback's face.
Yeah, and I think the play action running better will help the play action, which will give him more time to throw. I think the lack of the pass blocking issues maybe get exacerbated by the fact that it leads to an interception or a fumble a little too often right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it even worse. If it was just a throwaway, that would be one thing, but it's leading to some negative plays and some turnovers. So it stands out even more. Whereas maybe the run game struggles, a missed block only leads to a gain of 0, which would be fine if it was a throwaway. You're like, you would take that gain of 0 as opposed to getting sacked or anything like that. But I think they will get better. I think Josh Simmons has been playing pretty well the last month or so. He has stacked days. They talk about stacking days. I don't know that anybody has stacked him as well as he has.
Well, he's someone who feels like he's like in the long snapper camp, where if you don't notice Josh Simmons, that's probably a good thing, because you went through a couple games at the beginning of the year where it was just like, you're not going to believe this, but there was another Josh Simmons penalty that killed a drive. And it feels like you haven't seen that much. He might have had one penalty at Wisconsin, maybe like a false start. Yeah. But you're not seeing it as much. And you're not seeing it as much against better competition. He's taken multiple penalties. I think, if I remember correctly, I think he took multiple penalties against like Youngstown State. So if you did that against Youngstown State, but you're not doing that against Penn State or Wisconsin, okay, that's tangible progress, because as the competition gets better, if you're plateauing, as the competition gets better, your performance is going to get worse. And we have not gotten a full accounting of who has graded out as a champion and in any given week, but it feels like whatever the game grade is, it should be better for the last few than it was for the first few. And if you can, he is not a 1-year wonder in the transfer portal. He is someone who's going to be here for multiple seasons. If he's just better this year and goes from, boy, don't they have anyone else, to like, okay, this guy's not bad, and then can get to, hey, this guy's pretty good in 2024, that's a pretty big win. Yeah,
anytime you're returning your starting left tackle, and he's played pretty well as the season, and he's playing his best ball October, November, December, January, then you're starting the next season way ahead of the game, and I think that's what they will be doing with this offensive line next year.
Cameron Roper, do you think they will sit Lathan?
I do. I don't even know if it's a matter of sitting. I don't know that he's able to go. I didn't see him out here, but I was only looking for Jihad Carter, actually. I did see him. He was dressed, didn't have any braces or anything like that on his legs or anywhere. But I'm not expecting Lathan Ransom to play. The way they talk about it, and Jim Knowles didn't say he was out, but everything was couched with, if Lathan can't go. And never once did we get something from Ryan Day or Jim Knowles saying, well, he could go. It was always like, yeah, go on. I'm listening to to the scenario here you're painting where Lathan Ransom isn't playing. I'm not going to tell you he isn't playing, but I will go along with the scenario, and I'm not going to stop you from progressing forward on it.
It's the same way we were having conversations about Denzel Burke and Emeka Egbuka a couple weeks ago. Like, so if Denzel can't go, and Ryan on Tuesday said, later in the week you might have a better idea. I'm guessing we did not actually get an update from Ryan on Wednesday night.
The problem is, with the new setup on Wednesdays, it's hard to hear some of the questions because it's a more intimate environment. So somebody was asked about, and he said he had no update. So I'm going to assume that was Lathan Ransom. So and he said it'll be on there's an availability report for a reason. So that to me means he'll be on the availability report as unavailable in some form or fashion.
That would be my expectation. Yeah.
Dan Anderson, bold prediction. Marvin Harrison will have 3 or more touchdowns on Saturday.
I mean, that would be, he's done it 3 times in his career. So, I mean, it's still bold. I would say that's probably a 2-pointer.
Good. I'm taking it. Marvin Harrison will have 3 or more touchdowns on Saturday for 2 points.
You can't take somebody else's bold prediction.
That's Dan Anderson's.
That's Dan Anderson's.
He's not in the competition.
Connor Stallions, you thief.
This guy, Look what I have to
You
work
just
with.
shave the goatee.
You can't just wander in, hoity-toity, take somebody's, even though we did talk many weeks ago about how we should do bold predictions live. And if we hear one on the air, we'll just take it.
Yeah.
But
We did talk about that, didn't we?
Right, but we did enact it.
Because that would be
Until
wrong.
now.
No. 3 touchdowns for 1 point, 4 touchdowns for 2 points. It's like a carnival prize thing. 5 touchdowns for 3 points.
Hummus Hero, Rutgers is no longer a cupcake. They're now like a bran muffin. Smaller size and shape, but with more substance and not quite as easy to gobble up.
And also, you don't want to schedule too many Rutgers on your schedule because it can lead to.
They do play at
issues.
SHI Stadium.
They sure do. You gonna wear your SHI hat?
It's been in the garage for like a year and a half, so it might have spider webs on it. So yes, I will.
Walter Flynn, getting way ahead of ourselves. If the Buckeyes were to meet up with Florida State in the playoffs, how would you defeat them?
By scoring more points. Next.
I was going to say fewer points, but we'll see. I think it's the defensive line is where you disrupt things, and then you contain Jordan Travis, Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun versus Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson. I think that those would be some fantastic matchups. I would like Ohio State's chances more if they have Lathan Ransom back by then. I'm not going to spend too much time thinking about this possibility because it's the first week, and what I need to do is go back and see how many of the first week matchups actually ended up happening. I wouldn't expect that it's many, but I do want to go back and look because I think that'll be it won't mean anything, but it'll be interesting to know. And I like to know a lot of things, Tom, that don't mean anything.
And I think if you're Ohio State, I mean, how does that game shake out? Is that a 2 versus 3 game and Georgia wins out, and because they've beaten Missouri and Ole Miss and Kentucky and Alabama/LSU, therefore all of a sudden they have a great resume and they're number 1, and Florida State does not really have anyone tricky left on their schedule, so they're maybe number 3. If Ohio State wins out, then they're number 2 probably, because they're going to play Iowa or Wisconsin or Minnesota or whoever comes out of the West at that point. And, so then the Alabama thing, we saw this in 2019. LSU jumps Ohio State to be number 1 and get the first round bye against Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma because Ohio State played Wisconsin and LSU played whoever, Georgia, I think, in that year. But yeah, that's a matchup you could see in I think that's like a 2-3 Rose Bowl kind of matchup. So it's certainly possible, but Ohio State has a little bit of work to do to get there.
Well, Ohio State's going to play against paint chips if it goes to the Big Ten championship game because the Big Ten West is the Big Ten West.
What's in those paint chips, Kevin?
Lead.
Next.
Lead and leaders.
El Suzabo. Tom must practice and perfect a totally stupid Connor Stalions voice. Streets demand it.
I didn't know there was going to be a second part of that. I thought she had said that Tom has perfected the totally stupid. I'm like, well, you make us. That's
that's just Tom.
Sue. Yes.
Can we go back to lead and leaders? Because man, that is so good. I feel like that needs to not get overlooked. That was lead, paint, and leaders. That's the Big Ten under the current system.
But your Connor Stalions impersonation, we don't know what this guy sounds like.
Right.
What do the Spy versus Spy guys sound like on Mad?
I don't think they
didn't talk.
They
They were just very animated.
Did they squeak or anything? I don't know. Don't squeak.
I don't know. They weren't really guys. They just were like hats with eyes and beaks. I thought they were like pelicans or something.
I never cared for Spy versus Spy in the magazine.
Weird. Odysseus 2002. Who would best challenge the knight in a joust? Tom, Tony, or Kevin?
Okay, so this is the Rutgers Scarlet Knight. Now, are we talking about the one that's on the horse, or are we talking about the plush mascot? Because my answer will maybe be different depending on which one we're talking about. I need more information. Please follow up with additional context.
I don't like horses. I'm not afraid of them. I just don't want to be bitten by them or trampled by them. I'm not scared of it. I just don't want it to happen to me. So I wouldn't mess with that guy. The plush guy, I would be confident that I could take him. Now, when you say joust, do we have lances? What are we jousting with?
Yeah, you generally joust with lances. I mean, what else would you be jousting with?
Okay, so when I was a kid, there was a Medieval Times, and Tony, I have great news. Lyndhurst, New Jersey, Medieval Times, Hungry Hungry Huddle on Friday.
Where can you get a turkey leg with flying bits of horse butt? I mean, come on, no.
Have you? I had two stories here. I had a turkey leg at Disney World once, and I nearly choked to death, and I had to like pull into my throat a bone, like a sliver of a bone, out of my own throat so that I would stop choking. But fortunately, I had like a yard of beer to wash everything down. I did go to Dolly Parton's Stampede,
Dixie Stampede, like in Pigeon Forge.
Yeah, up in Pigeon Forge, of course. I mean, I'm from Ohio, so I think everybody has done
either there or Branson.
Why not both? So I've done that sort of thing. I've never been to a Medieval Times. They go out of business. They went out of business like in the 90s, but New Jersey perpetually stuck in the 90s. It does not surprise me that they have something like that still.
Well, you go there with your IROC and you yeah.
I said New Jersey.
Well, I know.
T-top, come on, got to do T-top. There are no utensils at Medieval Times, Tony, because there were no utensils at Medieval Times. But you can get a Pepsi. Learn that in a movie starring Matthew Broderick and Jim Carrey, in which Matthew Broderick wears a sweatshirt from which university?
Rutgers.
There's Ohio State University.
There's a better Matthew Broderick movie. It's War Games, where they hack
we're not going to War Games, the restaurant, so that's irrelevant, Kevin. Next question.
Biloxi Blues, the restaurant?
I think I only have a couple left here. And speaking of hacking, Murphy Serafino, any more news on Central Michigan, who knows where else, GA?
You know, Tom, the biggest piece of news from this is that Central Michigan has made one statement and then nothing else since. And the fact that, you know, I don't want to say they hired the same detective agency as Urban Meyer when he went to find the JT Barrett assailant, but I don't know if anything else is happening from this or who is asking about it, who's following up on this, because it shouldn't take long to figure out who got there, how he got there. Now, in terms of how he got the credential, that's going to be through the football operations. Like somebody from Central Michigan sent in their request of a batch of credentials to Michigan State's football operations department, and they print them out and they send them. And clearly, I think Central Michigan has said there's no counter stallions on there. We've talked in the past about what kind of.
Case closed.
Yeah. So, was there a name, or is this just general? You know, general admittance visitors bench. I wonder how many of those are there. Does everybody have to have a name? Does every credential have to have a name? Generally, yes. I mean, but I don't know that for sure. The stuff that you see, I don't know that teams just get, and they may just get, here's 20 for you, because they're allowed so many. So do you need names for all of those, or do you just like bypass that and here's your 20?
I think that I have seen credentials on Ohio State people that just say staff.
Okay.
I think. Now, this is not information that was particularly relevant at the time, so I may be mistaken. I can take a look this weekend and see how that all shakes out. But yeah, either way, he was wearing the matching staff shirt and had a credential that was not a forged credential. So, you know, his name wasn't on the list is kind of non-responsive, because my favorite part of this was on Tuesday morning when everyone was like, well, you don't even know it was him. It's like, well, Jim McElwain said they're investigating. And if you look at the picture, you know, I know my coworkers, I could probably look at a picture of someone on the Ohio State sideline. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more staffers at Ohio State, and look at them and go, okay, that is either someone who works here or does not work here, because it's the same people every week. And I'm not in the building 40 hours a week. So Jim McElwain, with a much smaller staff in Central Michigan, guess what? If he doesn't know who the person is, then it's not someone from his staff. And the number of people who could, you know, fit that, who look suspiciously like the other guy, you're shrinking. And then you get into the thing that Josh Pate tweeted with, hey, that looks a lot like the sunglasses with a video camera in them. And it's like, well, that seems like that number is shrinking even more. And I think if I was going to start asking questions about like, hey, how'd this guy get in here? I'd start with the coaches who seem to be standing next to him for a large chunk of the evening who, unless they are taking advice from, like the old Urban Meyer, never take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. I mean, maybe they take criticism from anyone, but it feels like if you were standing next to someone the whole game, you're like, hey, I don't know you. What's your name?
Well, even Jim McElwain looking over at one of his assistants, there's a picture, and Stallions, the guy who was supposedly Stallions, is right there. They're like 10 feet away. Wouldn't you be like, I wonder who that guy is right next to my coordinator, my running backs coach, or whomever? And all of this is pretty fishy. There are no good answers because right now there are no answers being given. And what's the next answer to come? We can't speak about an ongoing investigation. It's like, well, this is an internal investigation. You could speak on it, and then you just keep kicking it down the road and be like, well, we're still looking into it. And it's like they'll stop asking by February.
Yeah, probably. And this can't be that hard to figure out because there's only so many people there, and there's a decent amount of overlap between the Central Michigan people, the Central Michigan staff, and former Michigan staffers, including Jim McElwain, who worked at Michigan at a time when Connor Stallions also worked at Michigan. I have no idea if they knew each other. That's a much bigger department. You may not have, the guy who was I think he was an analyst for Michigan, but so he may not have interacted with Connor Stallions. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. It was before Stallions was on the staff full time, but yeah, it feels like you're asking me to squint real hard and tell you like these 7 coincidences, just a coincidence. So we don't know any more than we did 24 hours ago or 18 hours ago, whatever. But it feels like this. The coincidences are stacking up quite a bit. We should talk briefly about the story in the Atlantic about hey.
Athletic?
Sorry, the Athletic. Yes, different magazine. Yes, I'm clearly in mid-season form, so why don't you take over from here?
So what was it, Bruce Feldman, or just the athletic staff?
I think it was Bruce
reaching out to 50 college coaches about their thoughts on sign stealing and this whole Michigan cheating scandal. And I think I don't remember the exact numbers. I don't have a subscription, so I'm just relying on screenshots, but 37 coaches of the 50 said it's a distinct advantage, and like maybe 8 others said it's a decent advantage, something to that point.
Yeah, it was a 1 to 5 scale, and it was like one person said 1 and one person said 2, and
so I mean, clearly this completely rebuts and demolishes the 1 or 2 coaches that say it's not an advantage. And I think Richard Johnson from Sports Illustrated tweet out that he had quote tweeted that article saying that he spoke with one coach who's already played Michigan, and they told him that it wouldn't have mattered if Michigan had all of their plays because they would have had no shot against Michigan, and it wouldn't have affected a thing. And I'm telling you, that is a lie. If you have all of your opponent's plays, I don't care how good you are versus how bad the team that they're playing, and Michigan's opponents, be it UNLV, Bowling Green, or East Carolina, would have had a much better chance. And remember, they all covered against Michigan, I believe. So they covered the spread. So you give them all of the plays and give Michigan none of them, they're going to be closer than they were.
And just because criminology seems to be in vogue with this whole thing, as far as like, oh, who's talking to whom? The original Richard Johnson story on that was he's a good reporter. I'm not saying any of this is inaccurate. It's about who is talking to whom. And his initial story was about, that was the one where the 500-page manifesto thing came out, and Stallions, being this crazy lunatic. And it's like, well, your sourcing for that story is probably someone in the I'm going to guess the Schembechler facility, putting you in contact with whomever they would help further this narrative. And this can all be true, but the fact that this is true does not mean this is the only viewpoint on this kind of thing. I'm going to guess that whoever he was put in contact with was probably sourced from a similar thing. Just purely speculation on my part, but that's typically how this works. Is you can generally find someone to say anything. When you find 50 people to mostly say one thing and one person to say the other, you kind of put more weight on the 50 people. So that's just kind of a little bit of how the sausage gets made, I guess.
Kevin, anything else? All right. All right. If you have nothing else, I have nothing else. I want to thank you all for joining us. Always remind you, invite you to check us out at buckeyehuddle.com, become a member there, see us on the message board, check out the X's and O's, recruiting information, team intel, stuff like that. Love to have you there. Want to ask you as well, go ahead and hit the thumbs up if you have not done so yet, although I know you have, and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you have not yet done so. And if you're listening to this on the podcast platform, go ahead and leave us a 5-star rating and review. We would appreciate that as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.